Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Redemption Church. Sarah, thank you for clapping. I don't even play an instrument, and you're excited, so that is awesome. Well, today we are continuing our series on how Christ has saved us to be a culture, and we've been going through the book of Colossians and looking at a lot of things in there, how we are to be unique and distinct and faithful and set apart in such a way that we're examples. And one of the ways that we as Christians can be perhaps the greatest type of example is how we interact as families, how we function as husbands and wives and kids and parents and all of that. In fact, in Colossians chapter 3, where we're going to be looking today, it talks about the fact that wives are to submit to their husbands as to the Lord. And then it says husbands are to love their wives and not be embittered or frustrated with them. It tells the kids to obey their parents in everything, and then it tells parents, but listen, don't backlash and become so difficult with your kids that you discourage them. See, when I look at that passage, it reminds me of how a family is very much like a band, all right? So everybody in the family is playing a part. Everybody represents an instrument of some kind. And when everybody is on the same page, when everybody's doing the role that God has for them, it's pleasant, it's nice, it's this great experience. But then inevitably in all families, Christian families, non-Christian families, you know what happens. Junior hits puberty and he starts marching to the beat of his own drum, right? And so you're trying to enjoy the music, you want to enjoy the band, but it's not going so well. Now when the band of the family falls apart, who's the first person to notice? It's mom, right? So mom back there, she starts making a lot of noise. She's trying to get dad's attention, the kids' attention, trying to get the home put together. It's not working out right. So she starts telling dad, because if mom ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. So dad starts thumping on his bass, right? He's making a lot of noise. Everybody's got to stop, do what I tell you to do. But then the other kids, they just go off the beaten path. And pretty soon your family feels like this. And the only thing you can do is you can stop. You just got to stop. You got to get back on the same page. You got to go, oh, this is my role, this is my function, this is my calling. And then you start playing again as God has called you to play so that you can have the best family, the godliest family, the most encouraging family possible. And so you know what? Give the band a hand. Thank them for helping me out on this. Yes, all right. All right, so if you have a Bible, I want to encourage you right now to open up the book of Colossians chapter 3. That's where we're going to be hanging out this morning. Also, just a reminder on our Bible app, we have a new feature here for all of you to use if you want to use. It's the notes section. And so as I'm going along, there'll be point 1, point 2, point 3. You can fill those in. The verses are in here as well. So it's a little bit of a tool for you to be able to use, because our heart here is not simply like, let's use technology to be cool or whatever. We do it because we want people to grow. We want people to be fully committed followers of Christ. And hopefully these are ways that we can just kind of remember some things. You can email those notes to yourself, and hopefully it helps it to stick a little bit more. Now, like I said, this whole series is us asking the question of how can we be an alternative culture within our culture? How can we be an attractive culture? How can we be a transformational culture within our culture? And all of that then is kind of looking at the book of Colossians and seeing how Christians are to be different. And sometimes we're not different like we're supposed to be. And so we take time like this to go, all right, Jesus, how can I do a reset? How can I get back on the rails and come to that place where I'm really pursuing you, seeking you, and then from that you are bringing change in my life in such a way that others can see that and say, there's something about you that's different, and I want that thing, I want to understand that thing that drives you to be so different. And I think, again, one of the ways that we can be profoundly different within our cultures pertains to our homes. Which is why I believe Paul puts it in Colossians, right? Because he's wanting us to really embrace that this new way of life in Jesus then shapes the everyday spaces that we live in. Now, to understand the context of this section on husbands and wives and parents and kids, you have to understand the context of chapter 3. Right, so Brandon has tackled the first couple of chunks of chapter 3, but I want to refresh it just really quick because I want you to understand that bleeds into the conversation today. So the place we have to start when it comes to how do we function as a culture to the culture, how are we different, how are we alternative and attractive and transformational, it starts back in verse 1 of chapter 3. Starts off there and he says this: if you then have been raised with Christ, which means your life has been changed by Jesus, you have come to see your sin, your need for his grace, he stormed into your life, kicked in the door, brought a change to you. If you've been raised with Christ, he says, then seek the things that are above where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on the things that are above, not on the things that are on the earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. And when Christ, who is your life, appears, you will also appear with him in glory. Those first 4 verses tell us a couple of critical things. First of all, tells us the source and the means of our transformation. Right? The source and the means of our strength. It's saying, I'm not going to keep looking around at my world. I'm not going to get on this horizontal plane and try to figure everything out, but I'm going to start pouring my life toward Christ in such a way that Christ's life is really poured in and through me. So we begin to look toward Jesus more, want to be like Jesus more, want to seek Jesus more. We're prayerful, we're hungry, we're desperate, we're reading, whatever. All of those are ways we set our mind on the things above. Because that's where the transformation takes place. We're not talking about legalistic white-knuckling. We're not talking about just simply being people of virtues and that's it. We're talking about people who need Jesus, who seek Jesus out daily, and then he brings the power to do what we're supposed to do. Which then leads into the next section. What Paul says is if you set your mind on the things of Christ, and then what it's going to mean is first off, you put off things that are destructive in your life. And that was the next section after verse 4. Where he says, put to death these things that get in the way of a truly abundant, joyful, filled life. And so some of those things were sexual in nature, some impurity things in nature, and others were relational. Anger, wrath, malice, slander, right? All of these things, he says, put those things to death. Get rid of those things from your life. Set your mind on Christ, and then see those things excised from your person. But then he says, also in the place of that, put on some things. You put on things like compassion and tenderness and mercy and long-suffering. You put on love and forgiveness, right? So you get rid of the vices and you pick up the virtues. This is all the context. And what's going to drive that is then letting the word of Christ dwell in you richly, he says. And then we're saying it to one another in psalms, hymns, spiritual songs, right? So we're filling each other up with God's truth. All of this is the fuel that then helps us in the context then of our homes. Right? These are the things that we believe and how we believe them. It's not enough to say, I believe in Jesus. We're saying, because I believe in Jesus, I believe in how he calls me to conduct my life. So I seek him, I put off these things, I put on those things to let the word of Christ dwell in me, and then that transforms all the nooks and crannies of my everyday spaces, not the least of which is the Christian home. And I think this is so important because there is nothing in my mind that is more important, more life-giving, more society-shaping than the home. I mean, this is why we say it's the building block of culture. It's like the cell by which everything else is going to grow. And so it's good for us to step back and say, all right, then what should a Christian home look like? And how can that be a vehicle that God uses to encourage and inspire others around us? Now, the place we're going to start here in Colossians is where Paul starts. He starts with what I'm going to call the heads of the home. Not simply the head of the home, but the heads of the home. Going there into verse 18 again, as we look at number 1 in your notes, the circle of married life. The circle of married life, he says this: wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. And husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Now, to enter into this verse, the first thing I want to note is that the verse acknowledges a problem. It acknowledges a challenge that is in marriage. And the challenge that is for all of us, if you're in a married relationship or you have been in a married relationship, you know just empirically that the greatest challenge we all face is being truly selfless in our marriages. That is the biggest challenge, to truly say, I'm going to serve the other person selflessly. That is hard. You know how hard that is? Here's how you know it's hard. Selfless serving is hard. You see it on Sunday morning We're up here, we're in the worship set, it's between the second and third song. Trent says, here's how we can serve each other. We can move to the middle. And you feel it. I don't want to move to the middle. Why do I have to move? I showed up on time. Those people are late and lazy. They should sit on the floor. Me move to the middle. How do I get penalized for being on time? Now, it all started by saying, no, this is how we serve one another. This is a great way to be selfless. But no, I got to pick up my jacket. I got to move 3 chairs. That's a lot. Right? I don't want to serve. And so it's in our DNA, man, where it's just like service is hard. And the reason that's true is because if you go back to the book of Genesis that we did earlier this year, chapter 3, verse 16 is really clear. We see it's after the aftermath of Adam and Eve and how they rebel and everything else, and everything becomes inverted in the context of relationships, particular marriage. And so there, Moses says, you know what, here's going to be the problem. God says to the first married couple, you guys are going to totally fight with one another. You're going to want to dominate him. He's going to want to control you. There's going to be this constant just struggle, this battle, head-to-head stuff that happens because both are self-interested, right? Because Eve there didn't choose to play by the rules that God had set. The man, he didn't choose either, and then he blames his wife for it, and then that becomes the perpetual problem. There's just this kind of struggle and battle. And if you've been married for a while, you know that's the case. And while it's interesting that the Bible just simply says, hey, husbands and wives are going to fight, in our modern world, we've come up with all of this other language to describe what Genesis talks about. And fundamentally, I find in marriage, probably the place where we most struggle to be synced up is we struggle with leveraging passive-aggressive techniques in marriage, right, to get what we want. Because again, we use that when we're not getting what we want. So we become passive-aggressive in different ways to try to force the other person, manipulate them to do what we want them to do. In other words, we're not willing to submit or sacrifice, but we expect something. We have an anticipation. We have this preconceived notion of what it should be. And from that, we use passive-aggressive techniques. In fact, this week, I saw a video that when I watched it the first time, I didn't know if I should laugh or just stay silent and be convicted. So I thought, I got to bring this on Sunday because I think this captures well how, in a facetious sort of way, we leverage passive-aggressive techniques in marriage that then run contrary to what we're seeing here in Colossians chapter 3. So go ahead and watch this here real quick.
The key to a great relationship is control.
Control is the thread that keeps your relationship together. And we've found that being passive-aggressive is the best way to control your partner. I thought we could do something together today. Maybe go to the beach?
Not interested.
Or we could stay in and watch a movie if the beach doesn't appeal to you. When Amber won't talk to me, she really helps me learn that I did something wrong. And because she won't tell me what I did that was wrong, deep down I just assume that I'm simply wrong for who I am at the core of my being.
When I give JP the cold shoulder, it's encouragement for him to be a better person, because I don't really like who he is.
Oh, thank you for cleaning the kitchen for once.
JP shares so much gratitude with me through his snarky comments, and at the same time he shames me a lot. He is so good at directly communicating his thoughts with me with misdirected shame.
She deserves it.
I've decided I want to write a book. I'm so excited.
You've never written anything before, so you're not going to get picked up by a publisher.
JP's criticisms of my ambitions reminds me that I'm not enough of a person to fulfill my own hopes and dreams.
Yeah, Amber's dreams have no place in our relationship because they threaten my ability to control her.
Oh, I feel so loved when you control me.
Couples who control each other stay together.
I've made it to the gym 3 times this week.
That's really good. I didn't think you'd be able to get yourself to go at all. I use a compliment to slightly disguise my harsh criticism of Amber, and I have lots of it because I don't have any respect for her.
And I don't have any respect for myself either. That's why I'm with JP. We're a perfect match.
Oh, I talked to Drew this morning. He said he and Jillian are going to the Bahamas for a week.
Well, maybe if you made more money, we could go on a trip like that. I have a lot of expectations that JP will never be able to meet. And he deserves the opportunity to feel hurt about not living up to my impossible standards.
Amber feels empty inside because of her daddy issues from childhood, and I'd much rather have her hurt me rather than feeling her own hurt. And I think that by putting up with her emotional abuse, eventually I'll be able to rescue her.
You're my knight in shining armor.
It's a little close to home, some of it. You know what I mean? But those are the modern extensions of an ancient problem, right? That we struggle with our ability to selflessly invest into the other person. We have this expectation that we want something and then we hold them to it and it becomes a bit painful. And so this is where Colossians helps us to say, let's put you back on track. Like the band that fell apart and you need to stop and reset, Colossians is a reset. But it's a reset from the perspective of acknowledging that there's an actual dilemma. So to get this right, we have to kind of get what it says, right? Because there's people that look at this and get it wrong. People will look at this passage and instantly feel some frustration or some anxiety or some concern because they're like, what is this really trying to say, right? Well, let me give you some pictures of what it's not. I'll tell you what it's not first. First of all, it's not the picture of the husband above and the wife below, and the husband's the dominant one, she's the recessive one, and he tells her what to do, and then she just does it. That's not the picture that we have here in Colossians chapter 3. That's not it. Now, on the flip, it doesn't mean, well, then go the opposite direction, and what it's supposed to be is the wife is on top, the husband's on the bottom, she's the domineering one, and he does what he's supposed to do because she says it. That's not the picture of Colossians chapter 3. A third one is not two arrows coming at one another, equal velocity, right? Where it's like, I'm going to get my way. It's not like Congress, all right? It's not like, I'm going to bring my representation, you bring your representation, we battle that out, we vote, whoever has the highest wins. That's not what Colossians chapter 3 is describing. In fact, the best way, I think, to even help us understand better what it's sharing with us is actually to go just slightly to the left to the book of Ephesians. In the book of Ephesians chapter 5, that's where we're going to head here. You see the same basic passage, but Paul added a few more words in there to help us get some context of where this is all going. And I'm going to start in verse 18 because I think this is important to understand then what this is going to look like for a Christian marriage. It starts in verse 18. I'm going to start halfway through. Paul there says, I want all of us to be filled with the Spirit. This is no different than back in Colossians 3 where it says, set your mind on Christ, on the things above, right? It's the same idea. So you're wanting a spiritual-minded life. You're wanting a biblically informed life. You're wanting a prayerful life. So therefore, you can be filled with the Spirit. So he says, be filled with the Spirit. And then from that, and this is key, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. Verse 21 is, well, actually, verse 18 is key to 21. You're not going to be able to submit to one another out of reverence for Christ unless you're filled with the Spirit. But this idea of submitting to one another shows that we're talking about a mutual spirit of submission in the context of what happens next. It's mutual submission. Now, that doesn't mean exactly the same type of submission, but it means mutual submission. A little bit like our band analogy again, right? You've got lead guitar and rhythm guitar, right? And they play together. They're in the same band, playing the same basic music, but they're playing different roles in the context of that, and they're basically complementing each other. It's that same idea. And so from this idea of surrendering and submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ, Paul immediately then says, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church. And so it's just a fundamental truth. In the context of the band, he's lead guitar, she's rhythm guitar. That's the way that it's put together. But then it says in verse 25, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. Now I'm going to start with the wives and then move to the husbands. Here with the wives, it uses the word submit. That's where sometimes people may be a little tense. But in the original language, the New Testament was written in the common language of the day known as Koine Greek. It was a common Greek language. And in there, they have a little bit more nuanced usage of words than we do. And this particular word is in the middle voice. I know that's all fancy stuff. Here's what it means. It means that this is not a verse for a husband to tell a wife. I dare you. Right? Like this is not something where it's the Bible says husbands can tell wives to submit. That's not what it is. It's not what it says. This verse is not for a husband to wield. This is for a husband to simply go, oh, that's a nice verse. I'm not going to touch that any further. Because this is a verse for wives, and because it's a middle voice word, what it's saying is, or what Paul's saying to the wives is, you make the conscious choice to self-submit your life to your husband. That's why it's middle voice. It's reflective. It's saying you subordinate your life for the sake of your husband that you love. This is not about subjugation. Like I said, it's not something a husband can wield toward or against a wife. If he does, he's wrong. But what it does mean is that a wife says, I love Jesus, because again, as is fitting in the Lord, as you would with the Lord. So a wife is saying, I love Jesus, and I love Jesus so much, I want to do what Jesus calls me to do. And what Jesus calls me to do in the context of marriage, which is always a tug of war, is he calls me to then submit my drive to control, and instead to kind of pour myself out for the person that I love. That's the point. And you're showing love and loyalty to Jesus by doing it this way. Now, if I was to try to dissect this a little bit and say, what is the way that this most translates today, right? So, in other words, what would submission look like today in the language that we use? How would a wife show that toward a husband? I'm going to choose a word that's actually pretty popular in Christian circles to talk about this. I'm going to use the word respect. Respect is a great word. It's a great word because the love language of the stereotypical husband is the love language of respect. If a husband feels respected by his wife, that's rocket fuel for life. If a husband feels like when he comes home that his wife says, man, I love you, I admire you, I appreciate you, I hold you in high esteem. For a husband, then that's just energy for life. Because it's like home is the safe place, and my wife appreciates who I am and how I'm built, and that's huge. And that's a way that then we as husbands feel built up. Now, where the disrespect can be felt is things like if you look at your husband and say, he's not doing what he's supposed to do or what I want him to do, and so there's a lot of lecturing. Or if you get really angry and you just blow up and you would say, I'm just trying to share how I feel, but for him it feels like disrespect. Right? And so yelling can feel like disrespect. Comparing can feel like disrespect. Why aren't you more like Jim down the road? His wife never has to worry about this. Don't ever say that. Don't ever say, well, why aren't you more like my dad? Don't ever say that. Right? Because all those things feel like, man, then you don't respect me. Or if you withhold affection or you withhold words, all of those things translate as feeling like disrespect. If it sounds like he doesn't know what he's doing and you're going to tell him, you don't know what you're doing. Go get on YouTube, figure it out. Like that, all those things for a husband are going to feel that way. And I know that sounds weird because a lot of times, here's what I know about wives. Wives are like, I'm just trying to help. And I get that. I honestly think the motivation most of the time is they're just trying to help, but they don't realize that some of these are triggers for husbands to then feel the sense of I'm defensive or whatever else. And when that happens, here's the weird part. Husbands don't lean in and say, oh, please tell me more. Or, oh, you're really upset right now because we're not close and the yelling tells me come near. Right? Like that's not a dude brain. A dude brain is really simple. She's mad, I'm backing away. Right? Fight or flight, flight. Right? And the reason for that is, again, because it seems like you're mad at us. I mean, if you're mad at us, you don't want me to be close to you. You want me to be far away from you. You want me to be out of the house, down the street, down the road, another state, till you feel better, and I'll come back maybe. Like that's going to be the thing that we translate. And I know that's weird sometimes for women. Ellen and I have done a lot of marriage counseling and premarital counseling. And here's the thing, and hopefully this helps both men and women. When oftentimes I find with wives when they either, like I said, begin to use a lot of words of frustration or they get angry or whatever else, it's a warning alarm, right? Husbands take it as again, feeling disrespected or you're mad at me or whatever else, and that's sometimes really our bad translation. For husbands, I'll tell you this, when your wife usually goes to that place, what she's saying is we need to be more synced up, we need to be closer. Whenever you start to hear those words, what it is it's circle the wagons, rally the troops, man, call in the planes. Like, we need to be close. And our tendency as men is to back off. No, we need to press in. That's a little freebie for you for showing up. But honestly, for wives, it's even going, okay, how do I communicate with him in his language? Right? How do I share with him that I'm hurting or I'm afraid or I'm insecure, all of which is totally fair, all of which you should share. Right? If your alarm's going off, you should press into your husband and do that. But you have to think in terms of what are the words that aren't going to cause him to instantly become self-defensive and say, I feel disrespected and therefore I'm going to pull away. Because what you're ultimately wanting is him to press in, not step back. And so you have to kind of figure out, okay, what's a way that how can I talk to him at a time where it isn't in the heat of the moment? It's not like after a day of just kind of the salsa level going from mild to medium to hot to burn your face off. And then he walks in the door and you go, we got to talk. Like to go, okay, I got to get calm, and then I can constructively have the conversation with him, because ultimately what I'm trying to do is love Jesus by loving my husband, by submitting to him in such a way that I can share with him what I'm really thinking, feeling, and struggling with, but not in a way that he feels assaulted, attacked, and maybe even pushed away as I communicate. I'm not saying that's easy. It means we all have to be students of our spouses, right? We have to be real students, and again, what does it require? Go back to Ephesians, submitting to one another as we walk in the Spirit. This is about ultimately a spirit of submission as opposed to a spirit of control or a spirit of getting what I want. And so Paul is saying this, he knows the tendency and the temptation in these relationships, and he knows that, again, it can be hard. And so to the wives, he says, make this decision before the Lord to do it in this way, and you're going to be different than the culture around you. You're going to face problems different. You're going to face the marriage different. You're going to serve in a different way, and it's going to be a beacon of hope to those who are struggling, and there's plenty of people struggling in marriage, and not just outside of the church, inside of the church too. I want to be clear that a lot of things we're talking about, I know some of us right now are in the thick of feeling that. You're like, on the way here this morning, we were fighting, going hard, arguing, and then the doors had to open at church. Right? Let's go in and sing to Jesus. And then we get back in the car, I'm going to tear your face off, right? So, right? Or you do it when people call your house, you're fighting. No, I got to answer the phone. Hello, right? So you know to shut it off and then you turn it back on later, right? So I know that we all may have those times, and some of you may be going through that now, but this is where Paul's saying, all right, this is how you stop the music and get back on track. You just go, I need to press into the Spirit, press into Jesus, seek the things above, and submit to one another. And in the context of a wife, it's submitting to her husband in a way that shows respect, because that is his love language. To the husband, though, this is husbands, you need to love your wives. It says you need to love your wives. It says you need to not be bitter at your wives. And again, in this passage in Ephesians here, it says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. Sacrifice is a deeper form of submission. So this idea that says the Bible tells women to submit and men to lead. No, the Bible tells women to submit and men to die in the context of their marriage. It says you go even further in the role of submission to sacrifice. You make the investment that says, you know what? It's not me first, it's my wife first. It's not my agenda, it's how do I build her up in the way that Jesus has made her to be. That's the spirit of it. And so it means for us as men, as we look at our wives, it can be tragically easy to become embittered at wives. And that embitterment doesn't have to always be the ugliest form of it. Maybe sometimes it's just like, I wish I would have married somebody different. I wish my wife was more like that gal down the street, that person at church, that person in the office. I wish they were more like this and more like that. You know what? If you married that gal, you'd find she's the same as your gal, right? She really is. You just kind of create this fantasy bubble of how it would be so different, and that's not true, and that's how you become embittered, and you wish you had something different or someone different or some conditions that were different. But see, here Paul is saying, no, you sacrifice, you love who they are, you love how they do what they do, you love how they're put together, how they're wired. You want to make sure you affirm them and you give them time and you listen to them and you do things and say things and make decisions and have habits that build confidence in their lives and not insecurity. Right? Because again, what are you doing? You're submitting to Christ. You are being filled with the Spirit, and from that, it fuels then your being a husband. And what this means, again, even in this whole discussion, is let's say you have your marriage is all spun up and you are in a place where it seems like a lot of fighting, a lot of difference, and maybe the fighting is Cold War fighting where you're just not talking, but you're fighting, right? I'm going to put a lot of pressure on the men that says, you know what, this really starts with you to fix. I think a lot of times, I'm saying, hey man, if husbands are to love like Christ loved the church, what did Christ do? He came and stepped in for the church when the church wasn't interested in healing. Right? When people didn't seek salvation, he sought them. I think it means as husbands, we need to press in. And you may say, but I'm going to feel attacked. I'm going to feel insecure. I'm going to feel disrespected. I'm going to say, I get it. Pray it through and keep pressing in. Keep pressing in, because I guarantee what we find, Ellen and I find when we do counseling with people, more often than not, when it's really spun up, the wife is waiting for the husband to engage. She's waiting for the husband to engage. Now, sometimes it can go so far off the rails, it's very hard to get it back. But oftentimes, when the wife seems most frustrated and the guy is most pulled away, what she's saying is, I'm frustrated because you're pulled away. So step in. So step in and do it in a way that just as Christ does the church. I think about Matthew chapter 11, 28 to 30, where he says, come to me all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take up my yoke and learn from me, for I'm lowly in spirit and heart. Lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy, my burden is light. There's a sense in which Jesus invites rest. As husbands, we sometimes need to press in the midst of the hardship and invite rest and say, I just want to settle this down. I just want to be close to you. I just want us to get this back on the rail somehow. How can we begin to do that in a calm way? Because this is how a husband can love his wife. And you're loving it this way because what is love? Well, love fundamentally gives more than it takes, right? It builds up more than it belittles. I mean, we know all of these things that love does, right? It exalts more than it subjugates. So that's what we want to do then as men. In fact, in the overall marriage context, like we said, it's not arrows above and below. It's not arrows side to side. I want to really show you this is what marriage is. It's like this. It's just like that. So a husband, he's called to lead, but what's he do with his leadership? He instantly comes under and lifts up. And a wife, while she chooses submission, she does it in such a way to inspire her husband. So she comes up and encourages him, inspires him to greater things, and it becomes cyclical. It's like a flywheel, where the more you make that investment, and I know this is going to sound sappy, but it's almost the attitude in marriage of it's like, no, after you. No, after you. Like, that is a lot better than my way. Nobody has fun in a my way relationship, right? Nobody. Ain't nobody happy. And I find again, our marriage, mine and Ellen, we just celebrated 27 years here in this month. And yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, we're old people now. Woohoo! And then I have my daughter and future son-in-law sitting in front of me who are getting married in less than a month. Buckle up, baby! Yeah, take a lot of notes. They are. That's awesome. That's fantastic. You guys... But here's the problem. She's got almost a full page. You only have a half a page. I know. So, but she uses 15,000 words a day. You only use like 7,000 or something like that. So it's all right. All right, it's good. So, but even in our relationship, I mean, Ellen and I have had seasons where it's not good. Yeah, right, that it's not fun, that we're out of alignment, and you start to feel it. I mean, you know when you're starting to get out of alignment. And if I reverse engineer all of those seasons, it's because at least for me, I can't speak for her, won't speak for her because I'm smarter than that. But when I reverse engineer those seasons, it's because I started feeling forgotten, or I started feeling picked on, or I just started becoming just kind of inherently selfish because I'm awesome at that. And I started having expectations that she wasn't meeting, and then that's where it gets out of sync. And it just all comes back to the fact that I wasn't willing to take up my command that says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Love your wife and don't become embittered with her, right? Instead, I started getting embittered or disappointed or frustrated or at odds, whatever it might be, right? And so this is where we have to kind of hit the reset. Go, okay, I'm going to do this different. And I want to be clear with both husbands and wives, these are not verses where you tell the other what to do. Don't do that. If you're sitting there up to this point, and in your mind you're like, oh yeah, my spouse should do that one, and that one, and that one, you missed it. This is what I need to do. I can't look at this and say, these are the things that Ellen needs to do. I can look at this and say, these are the things I need to do. Whether she does it or not, that's between her and Jesus. I just need to do what I'm supposed to do. But if both do, it's like this flywheel. It's mutual investment, it's mutual submission in different ways that fuels intimacy and joy and growth and opportunity. And so that's how we live in this context. Now, if it was just marriage, that would be tough enough. But then we have this whole other addition to our families, right? So we're trying to work through our marriages. We're trying to have holy, healthy, joyful, God-honoring marriages. But then there's a curveball that's thrown in there, and that is kids. Kids smooth over everything in life. And so I want to speak to the kids in the room. I'm not speaking to parents in the room. I'm speaking to kids. This is a verse for kids. This is not a verse for parents. But I'm going to tell the kids the secret of being a happy kid. You want to know the secret of being a happy kid? Kids in the front row, kids down here. Here's the secret of being a happy kid. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Now, right now, kids are sitting there, teenagers in particular, are saying, so you're saying I'm going to be happy if I obey my parents. Right. Right, I am. I'm going to say yes, that is true. Now, to keep with the model, wives were submit. We said submit is a middle voice verb, which means the wives choose to do that. Here, it's not the word submit for kids, it's the word obey. And in the Greek, the word obey means obey, all right? So, it's so simplistic, man. It is like Newtonian physics. It's predictable every time. So, you obey. And what's it say? It says, you obey in everything. And all God's parents said? There it is. All right. So, yes, you obey in everything. And why do you obey in everything? Well, here it says, because fundamentally it pleases the Lord. It makes God happy. But I want to appeal to another component of that, which is your own self-interest as the youth. Right? This benefits you. Because what we know consistently throughout the Bible is if you obey the Lord and it pleases the Lord, God blesses you. Right? So I think there's self-interest involved, that when you actually obey your parents, this is the route to a happy and joy-filled life that is not the same as if you choose to disobey. So, for example, to the youth in the room, I want you to think about a time in which you chose to do something different than what your parents wanted you to do. You chose to disobey. You chose to stay out later. You chose to sneak out of the house. You chose to get into some kind of trouble. You chose to lie, cheat, steal. You're terrible people at this point, according to my list. Whatever it was you chose, right? Did your life go better when you did something like that and then you had to have a face-off with mom and dad where you're like, this enriched my life? I am all the happier, mom and dad, that now we're having a 3-hour lecture. You happy with 3-hour lectures? You happy with lectures in which you lost your phone, the car, the door to your room, their respect, their trust? Do you really kind of look at all that and go, I'm grounded till I'm 35. This was awesome. Usually the event doesn't fit then the punishment. You're like, that was fun for 4 hours and now I can never leave my room that has no door, Right? And so I would look and say, now the other one maybe is that where you said, oh no, I got away with it, Matt. I did something. My parents never found out. Ha! Right, but you got to worry about ever getting caught. And in this little town, good luck with that. Right? Right? It's going to be on the police blotter. It's going to be on the Facebook community message board, Yeah, you're not getting away with nothing, man. So then you have the anxiety and the fear of getting caught for what you did and everything else. And so fundamentally, to not obey is a drag, right? On top of the fact that aside from your parents, you have God that sees all the time, and he will bust you at some point. He'll bust you. And so Paul wisely again here says to the kids, choose obedience, because obedience makes you ultimately happier and ultimately more free. And with our 3 kids, we've always tried to have that message with them. We're like, you know what? When you guys do the right thing and you're honest with us and everything else, what do you get from that? You get freedom, you get trust, you get more opportunity to do more things, but if you lie or you do something you shouldn't and try to cover it up and everything else, then you lose trust, you lose freedom, you lose opportunity. It just never pays off. I mean, it's almost like simple economics, right? You want to have a rich life, play within the rules. You want to have a life that costs you with interest, then don't. And so Paul is trying to put the whole family together. He's saying, wives, man, invest in your husbands. Husbands, invest in your wives. Create that kind of stability and security and bring that parental spirit to the equation. And then kids obey. And so the model is definitely parents are the arrow that comes down and kids are the arrow that comes up, right? And that's the spirit of this whole thing. It just says as kids, while we're under their roof, we want to kind of honor the tone that they're setting. And God's going to bless you as a kid. Right? He's going to bless you as a kid. Even sometimes, get this, you ready? We as parents can be wrong. Sometimes as parents we're wrong. Sometimes as parents we're either not heavy-handed enough or we're too heavy-handed. Sometimes we're, too permissive, and other times we're too harsh and everything else. But while you're under their roof, the more you try to figure out how can I still obey, even in the context of this, and honor Christ in the context of that, He's going to bless you for that. He's going to bless you. But there's an important thing in this too we have to remember. While it is parents are the arrow above, kids are the arrow down, it's not parents are the arrow above so harshly that you nuke your kid, that you blow your kid up in the context of parenting, right? And so what is here is that number 3, the key to being a godly parent. What's the key to being a godly parent? It says, fathers, do not provoke your children. And really, this can go for both parents. But fathers, do not provoke your children lest they become discouraged. And all God's kids said, amen, yeah. They're like, no, I'm afraid to say that right now, man. I'm sitting next to my mom and dad. They'll nuke me after this if I say that. All right, so, no, it's true. See, we need both of these verses. We need kids to obey, but we need parents to make sure that they don't overextend their harshness or their demands or their controls in the raising of their kids, because it's really easy to slip into that. It's really easy to go beyond the boundaries of a good gospel-centered parent to saying things that you never mean. Like, I remember one time Ellen and I were at an airport, and we saw a mother with her 5-year-old daughter, and they needed to get on the flight, and the mother says to the little girl, Mommy's going to leave you here unless you come. Right? And I'm like, I want to see that. What's the fast number to CPS? You know what I mean? Like you're not going to leave your kid, but we say things like that. We use manipulative things that are, again, parents being too critical. Or we start to compare our kids. Why can't you be more like little Jimmy? He's always doing everything right. You do nothing right. Like, we say dumb stuff. We get angry and we say horrible things in our desperation. And so Paul says, man, if you want to get a solid perspective on parenting, make sure that you don't become so worn out and you grow so desperate that you grab for things that are just meant to control and manipulate, and they're artificial. He says, no, you got to make sure that you keep it in balance, right? Keep it in balance, because our ultimate purpose as parents is to basically impart grace and consistency in the lives of our kids so that they can see Jesus and grow up to be like Jesus as we seek to be like Jesus. And so one of the things I found as a young parent, Ellen and I came across this years ago, that was just a simple little chart that I think helps us as parents. You can bring that up right now. It's the it's control versus influence. And so on the bottom, 0 years of age all the way to 18 years of age. This is just true whether you embrace it or not. It's like a fact. It's like gravity. And so when they're young, you have a lot of control as a parent. A lot of control, right? So they're crying. What can you do? You can grab them by the shirt, put them in a crib, and walk away. You got control, right? As time goes on and they move toward the end of their teenage years, you have less control whether you think you do or not. But you have the opportunity for greater influence if you leverage it. And that's what you have to turn to. Now, what happens too often in the parenting model is sometimes we have little control when they're little. We just, let them go everywhere because it's crazy and I'm tired. And, we don't create confinement. And then they become teenagers and then we try to control them. And then we can't figure out why they're just going all over the place. And it's because we didn't create structure early. We try to create structure late, and it doesn't work. You have to use influence when it's later. You use control when it's earlier. This is the way that you can be a parent that doesn't embitter your kids and become too harsh. Control early, influence later. I changed this a little bit because I think this is more helpful for us as parents. Once they hit puberty, the control level jumps low fast. Right? It just does. I mean, and you have to, I'm saying this especially to younger parents so they can be prepared. Like, okay, that's what's coming. And so, you want to really make sure you create a lot of boundaries early on, because when they hit puberty, man, it gets crazy. And then it goes for a while, and then they become drivers. And you may think you have control once they're in a car, but you don't. You have zero control. They're off doing their own thing, going their own places. You don't know what's up. I know you're tracking their iPhones, whatever. You still don't know, right? You don't know what's up. And then, of course, it goes off to 18. And influence has to be the thing you leverage as they get older. Right? So control early on, influence later. And the way you're wanting to use that influence is really kind of running it through the grid of, truly Christian distinctives. Now, what this means for us as parents, and as we're going through that whole thing, is that we have to grow too. Right? This is one of the hardest learning curves, right? Is as they get older, you have to grow in faith. Pretty soon you have to take your teenage kids and say, Jesus, they're more yours than mine. Because they're going to make decisions that are going to break your heart. And you're going to have to wrestle through that. And so you have to grow in faith. You have to grow in prayer. Lots of prayer. You have to grow in Scripture, both the Scriptures that bring you comfort and the Scriptures that give you wisdom. You have to grow in Scripture. You have to grow in conversation and communication with your kids. You have to have awkward and strange conversations sometimes with your kids as they get older. You have to grow in wisdom. And fundamentally, you have to grow in grace. You have to grow in grace because, again, grace is foreign to the world, actually. Grace is foreign to the world. And parenting teenagers, it's very easy to want to parent with law. As you parent little kids and teenagers, you want to parent with law. It's easy to forget grace. But as they get older, you want grace to be attractive. You want forgiveness to be attractive. You want, restoration to be attractive. And so from that, I want to give you some biblical encouragements as parents. These are in your notes in the app. I'm going to go through these really quick. Biblical encouragements as parents. First thing we want to do from the earliest ages onward is we want to advise Scripture, don't merely command rules. Advise Scripture, don't merely command rules. We want to be parents that don't simply say, don't and do because I said so, but we want to ground it in what God says because, again, here's the difference. My words don't have power. Scripture has power. The Word has power. It transforms, right? Let the Word of Christ dwell in you richly. We already saw that in Colossians 3. So we want to inform or advise from Scripture more than merely commanding rules. Another thing, tell them why to do things, not simply what to do. Grounded in the reason. I said so is not going to carry them long. Give them a sense of, this is why it benefits me. This is why it's better. It takes a little bit more time. What this is about is coaching our kids and disciplining our kids, not simply disciplining our kids and controlling our kids, right? So it's a little bit different. Another thing you want to do, number 3, care more about spiritual development than good behavior. Care more about spiritual development than good behavior. If you just want a good kid, you can do that, but you care about their heart. You want to shepherd their heart. So you're having those conversations about what Jesus thinks, not just what Dad said, because you're wanting them to press into Christ more than simply just adhere to you, because they're going to go to college, and you want them answering to Jesus at that point, because you're not going to their dorm, and if you are, that's weird, all right? So you care more about spiritual development than good behavior. And then number 4, be consistent to be compassionate. Be consistent to be compassionate. One of the biggest challenges we have as parents is we're not consistent. One day we say, you know what, this is how it is, and then the next day we blow it off. One day we say, first time obedience, and the next day I'm going to count to 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now little Jimmy's in control when you made it past 3, all right? Little Jimmy's in control when you said 1, actually. Right? And so we want to be consistent, to be compassionate. Whatever standards you set, keep those so the kid knows every time this is what happens when I do something wrong, and you're being compassionate that way. It's when they don't know, that's not compassionate. When you're willy-nilly, that's bad. And so these are the biblical encouragements as parents, and we do this because ultimately we have priorities. We have some priorities. I want to give you the 3 priorities we have as Christian parents. The first priority is this: your agenda is not good kids, but godly kids. Your agenda is not good kids, but it's fundamentally godly kids. Therefore, your message is not lawful compliance, but gospel dependence. And so what you want your kids thinking more about how their decisions affect Jesus than just, again, whether they were bad or good. And all of this is because your goal is not raising successful kids, but faithful adults. We're not raising kids, we're raising adults. And we worry about their success and their education and all these things, but fundamentally we want faithful adults, not simply successful kids. And so all of these things are ways that we can grow and learn and mature and adapt and hopefully have a sense of, this is what we do as parents, as couples, as kids, to have homes then that model and emulate what Christ has for us. Now, for all of us, it means there's steps that need to be taken, and we have next steps every week. And maybe for some of us, we say, you know what, I'm hearing all of this, and I'm not a Christian. I don't know Jesus, but boy, I know my family needs some attention. And so we're going to say, man, your first step is Jesus. Because it goes back to what we saw in Ephesians, right? Be filled with the Spirit so as to submit to one another, so as to do these things. Or set your mind on Christ so as to put off these vices that create anger and frustration and all that, and put on values of forgiveness and love and compassion so that we can then be these kinds of families. Your first step is, man, I want to follow Jesus. And inside our app, you can tap that little thing that says, I want to follow Jesus. And that's your step. And man, we want to know about that. We encourage you to do that. Because that's going to be the key to dealing with a lot of these things. For others of us, we say, you know what, Matt, I could probably use some tools. I could use some advice on some things. And so maybe your first or your next step today is simply to say, you know what, I would love it if you would email me some online tools tomorrow and just give me some stuff to read through when it comes to parenting, based on the control influence model, or as a couple or as a kid, whatever else. Man, we want to get you some material so that you can grow and learn in these things. Or maybe for others of you, you say, you know what, Matt, there's a problem that my family is having that's pretty big, or I'm having with my parents or whatever else, and I could use just kind of a specialized, personalized answer. And if you tap that, I'm going to send you an email tomorrow saying, hey, let me know, what is it that I can help you with? And I'll send you a little personalized video reply of just some thoughts maybe on, again, marriage or parenting or being a kid or whatever else. Because, again, our heart is for you to be equipped so that you can be a culture maker in the culture by being different than what we see. So we make much of Jesus, and from that, people can then see our good works. They look to God, and from that they have hope. Let's pray together. Jesus, I thank you so much again for your grace and love and goodness, and I pray that we will truly walk in the Spirit. The key is walk in the Spirit. The key is set our minds on the things above, so that we can be everything that you have rescued us to be, and we can be a truly genuine culture to the culture. We love you and thank you in your good name. Amen.